There's a type of guilt that can show up after leaving a high control religion that doesn't quite add up. You can look at your decision honestly. You can see the reasons clearly. You may even feel more settled than you expected. And then guilt appears. Not because you've lied, not because you've harmed someone deliberately, but because something in you feels like you've crossed a line. That's what makes it confusing. Guilt usually signals wrongdoing, so when it shows up without a clear mistake attached to it, it can quietly pull you back into self-doubt. But guilt does not always mean you've done something wrong. Sometimes it means you've done something different. Healthy guilt is usually straightforward. You say something harsh, you apologize, it resolves. There's a direct link between behavior and repair. The guilt that lingers after leaving is often different. It doesn't point to one event. It doesn't resolve after reflection. It hangs around even when you can't identify what you're supposed to fix. That's because in many high control systems, guilt is not attached to harm. It becomes attached to independence, to questioning, to disagreeing, to stepping outside expectations, to prioritizing your own judgment. Over time, the mind makes a simple association. Staying aligned equals safety. Stepping out of line equals danger. When that pattern is repeated for years, it becomes automatic. You don't consciously think, this is wrong. Your body simply reacts. That reaction can feel like guilt, not because you've acted against your own values, but because you've acted outside a structure that once defined them. This is where the work of Gabor Mate is helpful. He speaks about how many of our emotional responses begin as adaptations. When belonging feels conditional, whether in childhood or inside rigid systems, we learn to adjust ourselves to protect connection. If harmony requires silence, we become quiet. If approval requires agreement, we agree. If safety depends on certainty, we avoid doubt. Those adjustments are not weakness. They are intelligent responses to the environment. The difficulty is that they don't switch off immediately when the environment changes. If your nervous system learned that disagreement threatens connection, then choosing differently can still trigger alarm, even when you are no longer in danger of losing your entire world. That alarm can register as guilt. And because it feels strong, it feels moral. It's important to separate two things that often get blended together: responsibility and conditioned emotional response. Responsibility is clear. It relates to behavior. It allows repair. Conditioned guilt is broader. It often feels heavy but undefined. It doesn't guide you towards fixing something specific. It pushes you towards shrinking yourself. And one way to tell the difference is to ask, is there something concrete I need to make right? Or am I uncomfortable because I'm no longer meeting someone's expectations? Those are not the same thing. You can care about people's feelings without accepting that their discomfort makes you wrong. Leaving may have disrupted relationships. It may have disappointed people. That's real. But disappointment is not the same as harm. Change is not the same as betrayal. Guilt tends to collapse those distinctions. There's another layer to this that catches many people off guard. Guilt often spikes during calm. You might feel peaceful for the first time in a long while, and then there's a subtle sense that you shouldn't feel this okay. almost as if relief itself is suspicious. That doesn't mean your piece is wrong. It can simply mean your system hasn't yet updated its definition of safety. If calm used to exist only inside the structure, calm outside of it can feel unfamiliar. Unfamiliar doesn't equal unsafe. But your body may need time to learn that. Nothing dramatic needs to happen when guilt appears. You don't need to argue with it, you don't need to obey it, and you don't need to punish yourself to prove you're still a good person. Sometimes, the most stabilizing response is to pause and say, this might be an old signal. Not a moral judgment, not evidence that I failed, just an old signal responding to a new situation. Over time, as you continue living in line with your own values rather than in reaction to fear, the intensity tends to reduce. Not because you become indifferent, but because your system slowly recognizes that autonomy does not equal exile. If guilt is lingering, it doesn't mean your conscience is broken. It may simply mean you care deeply about belonging. And you're now learning that belonging does not have to cost you your own judgment. That shift is gradual, and it's allowed to take time.